Clarity in the morning is not some romantic ideal. It is survival psychology at its most fundamental level. The first moments of the day represent your cognitive launchpad, the point at which the brain begins filtering chaos from order. If you wake up and immediately hand your attention to the external, notifications, emails, noise, then you have forfeited the inner ground before the first battle even begins. Your mind will mirror the disorder it consumes. Instead, if you begin the day by confronting your own thoughts in silence, you start from a position of sovereignty rather than servitude. Waking up early when the world is still quiet gives you the rarest currency in modern life, an uninterrupted thought. That hour is when intention can be heard over interference. You must use it not just to do things, but to remember who you are and why you're doing anything at all. This isn't about productivity hacks. This is about the preservation of identity in a world that wants to fracture your focus before you even brush your teeth. The human psyche is a fragile mechanism. It doesn't default to strength, it defaults to distraction. Morning clarity is the antidote to that entropy. By taking time in the morning to journal, meditate, or simply sit in conscious silence, you're engaging in a kind of mental weaponization. You're aligning your attention with your values before the rest of the world tries to sell you theirs. Even your posture in the morning matters. Slouching into the day communicates defeat to your nervous system. Rising, stretching, breathing deeply. These small rituals send signals to your mind that it is safe to be alert, safe aim, safe to act. When you begin the day with intentional motion, you prime your body to carry your mind's direction. Think of your morning thoughts as scaffolding. If they're sturdy, your focus has structure. If they're scattered, everything that rests on them is unstable. This is why so many people feel like they're drowning in distraction by 9 a.m. because they never built a foundation at sunrise. The morning is when you decide whether you will live today with aim or drift. Nutrition also plays a subtle but significant role in morning clarity. What you feed your body after you rise either energizes the brain or sedates it. Sugar, processed carbs, and rush routines dull the sharpness of your mind. A calm, nutrient-rich beginning is a message to your system that today's demands will be met from a place of strength, not stress. Silence in the morning is not emptiness. It is a psychological forge. Without external noise, you hear your internal conflicts. You begin to see where your thoughts are incongruent with your goals. That discomfort is a gift. It allows you to confront it before you project into the world. Morning clarity is how you cleanse the lens through which you'll see the rest of the day. When you start the day in control with mental precision and emotional neutrality, the rest of the world can swell, scream, and demand. But it no longer decides who you are within it. You've already done that, in silence. When it mattered most, if you don't write down your aims, you are not living with direction. You are drifting. The modern world is engineered for distraction, and if you don't deliberately define what you're aiming at, something else will define it for you. Your attention will be captured by algorithms, by marketing campaigns, by every shiny, meaningless thing screaming for your energy. Writing down your aims is not a motivational exercise. It's an act of rebellion against chaos. Aims clarify what actually matters. In a society where attention is the new currency, the ability to sit down, articulate your priorities, and write them out is a survival mechanism. It separates the reactive from the intentional. It distinguishes the person who wakes up with a mission from the one who spends the day chasing urgency. The brain craves specificity, not vagueness. Without aims, your mind becomes a slave to immediacy. When you write, you externalize what's internal. You turn vague ambitions into concrete targets. A written aim is not just an idea, it's a commitment. It stares back at you. It exposes procrastination. It reveals when your actions don't match your desires. And that tension, if you're honest, becomes fuel. The friction between who you are and who you could be only becomes visible when you have something clear to measure against. Goals that stay in your head are subject to distortion. They're emotional, unstable, and easy to rationalize away. But when you write them, you give them shape, you give them force. You are forced to confront whether they are superficial or sincere. Writing removes the fog, and what's left is either a path or an excuse. There's no in between. Every day you wake up, you are at war with entropy, with disorder, drift. Writing down you aim for the day is the equivalent of arming yourself. It is psychological armor. It doesn't mean the day will go perfectly, but it does mean you will not be operating blind. That matters more than most people realize, especially in a culture that thrives on your confusion. Your written aim is a boundary. It helps you say no, not out of guilt, but out of clarity. It anchors your decisions and protects your time from being hijacked by other people's agendas. If you don't write it, you don't own it. You may think you have goals, but if they aren't written, they don't exist. They're just mental noise, easily overrun by the next notification. Writing aims is not about control, it's about orientation. Even if your target shifts, even if circumstances evolve, you'll at least be moving with intent rather than spiraling in passivity. You can course correct, but you can't course correct nothing. An unwritten aim leaves you defenseless in a world that profits from your aimlessness. If you don't decide where you're going, someone else will decide for you. They'll offer convenience, comfort, and cheap gratification, but never meaning, never growth. Writing your aims is how you stay human in an environment designed to keep you reactive, emotional, and exhausted. The state of your physical environment is a direct reflection of the state of your mind. When your surroundings are chaotic, paper strewn across the desk, dishes piling up in the sink, clothes draped over furniture, it's not just a mess, it's a signal that your internal world is fraying, that your thoughts lack order, and that your actions are not oriented toward discipline or intention. The clutter outside becomes a mirror of the confusion within. Cleaning your space is not merely about aesthetics. It's a psychological intervention. It's a small but potent act of sovereignty over your domain. When you clean, you're doing more than moving objects. You are bringing structure to disorder. You are drawing a boundary between passivity and responsibility. And in that act, you reclaim part of your mind from the fog of negligence. People underestimate the power of simplicity. A clear room, free of excess, tells the nervous system it can relax. There are no hidden demands, no visual noise pulling you in 10 directions. You're not subconsciously scanning the room thinking of all the things you haven't done. You're present. You're grounded. A tidy space reduces decision fatigue, minimizes distraction, and reinforces the idea that you are in control of your environment. Order is not about perfection. It's about orientation. You might not always have the energy to maintain spotless surroundings, but the act of regularly resetting your space is a ritual of renewal. It's a statement that chaos is not your master. And for people who struggle with internal overwhelm, this external structure can become a life raft. You can't always fix your thoughts, but you can clear your table. You can sweep the floor. You can create a place where clarity becomes possible. Your space is sacred. Whether it's a single room, a corner of a shared home, or a studio apartment, it should serve your highest aims, not hinder them. If your space is full of distraction, you will struggle to focus. If your space is full of junk, you will feel emotionally weighed down. A tidy environment isn't sterile. It's purposeful. It invites creativity. It gives your mind breathing room. Clutter multiplies stress. It delays action. It keeps you tethered to unfinished business. It is the physical representation of deferred responsibility. And when you avoid confronting that mess, you're avoiding something deeper, the discomfort of facing your own inertia. Cleaning forces you to engage, to decide, to discard, and to prioritize, and that process sharpens the mind. Discipline is forged through repetition, and keeping your space tidy is one of the most repeatable disciplines available to you. It doesn't require genius or insight, only decision and follow through. And that matters because every time you choose order over chaos, you reinforce a neural pattern of responsibility. You send a message to yourself that your actions matter, that your space is worth maintaining, that your mind deserves clarity. In a world filled with noise, a clean space is a rebellion. It's a deliberate choice to foster stillness in the midst of pressure, to protect your cognitive bandwidth, to make space for deeper thinking. Saying no is not a rejection of others. It's an affirmation of your values. When people fail to say no, it's rarely because they don't understand their limits, but because they don't want to feel the discomfort of disappointing someone. That avoidance turns into a habit, and before long, they're buried under obligations that have nothing to do with their core aims. A life spent constantly accommodating others is a life lived reactively, not intentionally. Discipline begins with boundaries. And boundaries require the capacity to say no, calmly, clearly, and without apology. Not from a place of anger, not from a place of resentment, but from principle. Emotionally driven responses, saying yes to avoid conflict or no to spite someone, erodes self-respect over time. But when you say no from discipline, you become more trustworthy to yourself and to others. Every yes that is not carefully chosen becomes a debt. You owe time, energy, and presence to commitments that were made emotionally, not rationally. And those debts compound. You may think you're being helpful, even generous, but in reality, you're betraying the long-term goals that require your time and attention to build anything meaningful. Whether it's a career, a relationship, or a sense of peace, you must protect your time with vigilance. People who cannot say no eventually lose the ability to say yes to the right things. Their lives become full but unfulfilled. Their calendars are packed, but their hearts are restless. They are overextended, exhausted, and often quietly resentful. Saying no when done with integrity is not selfish, it is stewardship. It is recognizing that your time and energy are finite and therefore sacred. Discipline requires discomfort. Saying no will not always feel good. It may make you appear cold or difficult in the eyes of others. But those are short-term consequences. The long-term reward is clarity, focus, and the ability to show up fully for the things that truly matter. When you no longer fear the discomfort of other people's reactions, you gain an incredible amount of internal freedom. This is not about becoming rigid or inflexible. It's about being intentional. There are times when sacrifice is necessary, when helping others pulls you out of your comfort zone in a way that strengthens your character. But that sacrifice should be chosen, not coerced. Discipline is not about shutting the world out. It's about choosing when and how to engage with it in a way that aligns with your principles. Saying no as a discipline also teaches others how to treat you. If you always bend, people stop asking if you're willing, they just assume you will. And in that assumption, your dignity erodes. But if your no is firm, respectful, and consistent, you train the world to take your time and values seriously. You become someone who can be trusted to act from conviction, not from pressure. The ability to say no is one of the purest expressions of self-respect. It's a reminder that you are not owned by your emotions or the demands of others. It is a daily practice in aligning your actions with your highest goals. And it is a necessary act of rebellion in a world that profits from your distraction and your exhaustion. Scheduled solitude is not a luxury, it is a discipline. In a world saturated with noise, attention is currency and every distraction demands payment. The mind cannot function at its highest capacity when it's constantly being pulled by stimuli. Solitude is not about isolation for its own sake. It is about creating the conditions in which thought can sharpen and clarity can return. Without it, focus withers under the pressure of constant interruption. When solitude is intentional and consistent, it becomes a ritual of mental recalibration. It's not just time alone, it's time protected for the purpose of confronting your own mind. You sit with your thoughts, your questions, and your discomfort. This is where self-honesty is forged. Not in the presence of others, but in the silence that cannot be escaped. Focus is not something you turn on like a switch. It's something you rebuild in the absence of noise. Solitude gives you distance from the social performance. We all wear masks, subtle, polite, necessary masks, but over time they exhaust us. Being alone without needing to impress, persuade, or entertain allows the self to breathe again. In that breathing space, the brain reorganizes itself. Ideas settle, priorities reemerge, and decisions that once felt overwhelming become startlingly clear. Solitude clears the emotional clutter so focus can find a foothold. Most people fear solitude because it reveals what they've been avoiding. That fear drives them toward constant stimulation, news, conversations, digital scrolling, because silence forces the internal dialogue into the foreground. But it's precisely that internal dialogue that holds the keys to focused living. If you don't know what you think or why you think it, then every distraction becomes an anchor and every decision is reactionary. Scheduled solitude is not the same as procrastination or laziness. It is structured, purposeful, and respected. It might look like a walk without a phone, a morning journaling session, or an hour where you simply sit and think. The point is not the activity, but the protected mental space. In that space, you are not being pulled, you are choosing what to attend to. And in that choosing, focus begins to reassert itself as the default rather than the exception. The more regularly you engage in solitude, the more resilient your focus becomes in social and professional settings. It trains your brain to withstand boredom, to resist impulsivity, and to remain tethered to a single thought until it's fully understood. This ability is rare. In a culture that rewards reaction speed over depth, solitude becomes an act of intellectual defiance. It is where your mind learns to think deeply instead of shallowly and habitually. Creativity, too, is born in solitude. Not the kind of creativity that copies trends or panders to validation, but the kind that originates from deep inner processing. When you are alone, you are more likely to access those strange and useful thoughts that don't arrive in a crowd. Solitude makes space for originality because it silences the noise of expectation, and in that silence, focused creation becomes possible. The truth is, if you don't schedule solitude, the world will consume every available corner of your attention. It won't ask for permission, it will simply take. And what it leaves behind is a scattered, anxious mind incapable of depth. Focus does not survive in that environment. But when you carve out time for solitude as a non-negotiable practice, you rebuild the strength of your attention and reclaim the clarity necessary to live with purpose and direction. Motivation is emotional. It comes in waves. One day you feel ready to conquer the world, and the next, even brushing your teeth feels like a monumental task. Repetition, on the other hand, is structure. It doesn't care how you feel, it cares that you show up. And over time, what you do repeatedly will carve out who you are far more than what you feel any given moment. We're obsessed with motivation because it's romantic. It makes the story sound better. I had a dream, I felt inspired, and I acted. But most of life doesn't work like that. Success, growth, resilience, these aren't born from fiery feelings. They're the product of showing up again and again in the absence of excitement. Repetition is humility. It says, I don't need to feel like it to do it. When you repeat an action enough times, it becomes part of your nervous system. You don't have to think about brushing your teeth. You just do it. That same principle applies to every domain of life. If you want to think clearly, practice thinking clearly every day. If you want to be disciplined, act with discipline every day. The repetition trains the behavior until it becomes automatic, and that's when it becomes powerful. The mistake most people make is waiting until they feel ready. They assume they need inspiration to begin, but what they actually need is rhythm. Rhythm builds momentum, and momentum builds belief. Eventually, the discipline feels easier than the chaos. But getting to that place requires doing the work long after the novelty wears off and long before the rewards become visible. Repetition teaches the brain what matters. It tells your mind to, this is important enough to revisit. That act of consistent reinforcement strengthens neural pathways. Whether it's a thought pattern, a physical skill, or a spiritual habit, it becomes etched into your behavior. This is not about blind routine. It's about deliberate, meaningful repetition, the kind that reshapes identity. Motivation is reactive, repetition is generative. When you rely on motivation, you're at the mercy of circumstance. Bad weather, poor sleep, a critical comment. Any of these can derail you. But when you're built on repetition, those things become background noise. You've trained yourself to act regardless. And that's what separates maturity from wishful thinking, action taken in the absence of mood. Repetition is not glamorous, it's not flashy. No one applauds you for waking up at the same time, doing the same workout, writing the same journal entry, practicing the same piece of music. But over years, those unnoticed acts compound. The person who can endure repetition without complaint becomes the one who quietly surpasses those who depended on adrenaline and excitement. There's a reason ancient traditions, warrior cultures, and elite performers all emphasize repetition. It's not because they lack inspiration. It's because they understand how fragile motivation is. True strength is built on what you can do repeatedly when no one's watching, no one's clapping, and you don't even feel like clapping for yourself. Your energy is not infinite. It is a finite currency, just like time or money, and how you spend it determines the quality of your life. Yet most people throw it away carelessly, on meaningless arguments, toxic people, and tasks that drain rather than build. Protecting your energy means you become radically selective about where your attention goes, because energy follows attention, and attention shapes reality. Every decision you make has an energetic cost. Every conversation, every commitment, every emotional investment, these are transactions. Some leave you richer in clarity and strength, others bankrupt you in confusion and fatigue. The failure to recognize this is what leaves so many people in a chronic state of exhaustion. They're not physically overworked, they're energetically mismanaged. There's a difference between being busy and being drained. Business can be purposeful and invigorating when aligned with meaning. But energy drain comes from scattered focus and fractured boundaries. If you say yes to everyone and everything, you say no to your core. And the deeper cost is spiritual. You become someone who's constantly reacting instead of intentionally directing. Toxic relationships are some of the biggest energy thieves. People who live in drama, who demand your time but reject your boundaries, who guilt trip and manipulate. These are spiritual liabilities. When you tolerate them in the name of being nice or keeping the peace, you trade your peace for chaos. That trade is never worth it, and protecting your energy sometimes means walking away without apology. Social media, too, is a silent predator of your energy. Every scroll, every comparison, every outrage algorithm pulls from your reserves. You may not notice the depletion right away. It's subtle, but it adds up. The mental clutter, the reduced focus, the quiet anxiety that lingers in the background are all symptoms. Energy protection means filtering what you allow into your mind just as carefully as what you put into your body. Protecting your energy also means guarding your inner dialogue. Self-criticism, rumination, and fear-based thinking are internal leaks. You could cut out every toxic person in your life, but if you continue to let your own mind sabotage you, the energy loss remains. Strength begins with inner discipline. The ability to recognize destructive thought patterns and choose better ones, again and again. Sleep, nutrition, movement, and solitude are not luxuries, they are energy investments. When you neglect them, you are making a withdrawal from your physical and emotional reserves. And over time, that debt shows up as burnout, resentment, illness. But when you honor those needs, your energy replenishes, and your ability to face the world with clarity and conviction grows. Finally, protecting your energy requires the courage to live by principle rather than pressure. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop performing for approval. Instead, you root yourself in integrity, and from that grounded place, you choose carefully, speak clearly, and walk deliberately through a world that constantly demands more than it deserves from you when the day comes to a close. Most people collapse into distraction, scrolling, numbing, or mindlessly consuming. But this is the most critical window of time, not for attainment, not for integration. The mind needs closure. Without it, thoughts remain unsettled, lessons go unrecognized, and patterns repeat without correction. Reviewing the day isn't about guilt or nostalgia. It's about turning experience into wisdom. Every day is a classroom and every interaction a lesson. But unless you pause and reflect, you miss the meaning embedded in the chaos. You miss the emotional responses that could have taught you about your triggers. You miss the moments of grace where you handled something better than before. Ending the day by reviewing it is the habit of a person committed to self-awareness. This review isn't complex. It's brutally honest. You ask yourself, where was I aligned today? Where did I betray myself? What did I say that I didn't mean? What did I hold back that needed to be spoken? These aren't questions for shame. They're questions for refinement. The goal is not perfection, but trajectory. Are you becoming more or less the person you're aiming to be? By reviewing your day, you begin to track recurring themes. You'll notice where your energy leaks. You'll see the faces that elevate you and the ones that leave you feeling hollow. You'll find habits that silently erode your focus. These aren't grand revelations, but small signals. But those signals, gathered daily, shape the course of your character over time. Writing it down, just a few lines, cements this process. The pen moves slower than thought, and that slowness invites depth. You begin to notice nuance. Maybe that outburst wasn't just anger, but old fear resurfacing. Maybe that tension in the room wasn't about what was said, but what wasn't said. The journal becomes a mirror, and if you're brave enough, it starts telling you things no one else will. This process also restores agency. Instead of letting the day happen to you, you reassert authorship. You examine your role in the script. You ask, did I react or respond? Did I operate from clarity or insecurity? These reflections return power to where it belongs, not in controlling others, but in governing your own mind. Reviewing the day isn't a ritual of sentiment. It's strategic. It trains the mind to close loops. It reduces anxiety by resolving ambiguity. It prepares you for deeper sleep, because when the mind has been emptied onto paper, it stops spinning its wheels in the dark. Clarity invites rest. An arrested mind wakes up stronger. What begins as a discipline becomes a sanctuary. 10 quiet minutes at night can create a lifetime of insight. This is not about productivity, it's about alignment. It's not about doing more, it's about becoming more attuned to the life you're already living.